my next guest, Sir Stephen Hough, who has written a book called Enough, Scenes from Childhood. Delighted to be joining me live on the line from somewhere in the UK, I warrant, author of his autobiography, Stephen Hough. So Stephen Hough, good morning to you. Can I call you Stevens, by the way, Stephen?
I'd be very offended if you didn't, Giles. Good morning. So nice to be talking to you.
Well, it's good to have you with us on a crisp but cold morning here in the TRE region throughout Spain. Tell us a little, because this book doesn't deal with your career as people will know you, obviously having played with some of the leading performance venues of the world. But it takes us on a journey up until the point where you return to music, which seems incredible because most of us would assume that virtuosos like yourself are only only their happiest, at their finest when they are glued to a keyboard or a fretboard or to a French horn 24 hours a day.
That's right, Giles. Well, the book literally ends on the day before I start my professional career. So I won a competition in New York called the Naumburg when I was 21, and that started everything off. Until then, I was just a student. And so the book takes me from as early as I can remember to that point. In the very early years, I was glued to the keyboard. I wanted to do nothing else but play the piano. My parents would take me to the zoo and I would look around. Oh, that's very nice. When can we go home? Because I want to start playing the piano again. But then in my early teens, I guess 12, 13, around then, it's a nervous breakdown, really. It sounds a bit dramatic to say that, but I didn't want to go to school. I started underachieving, watching 6 hours of TV a day. I didn't want to play the piano anymore, and I lost interest in music. And so I also talk quite a lot about that in this book. And then around the age of 16, I came back to it. And then by the time of 21, when the book ends, I was fully in the saddle again and ready to go.
Take us back to the early childhood, because you're from Cheshire originally. So what particular part of Cheshire are you from? Are you Chester? Or are you Manchester borders? What particular part of Cheshire, whereabouts from Cheshire were you from?
I was born on the Wirral, which little peninsula bit between England and Wales, sticking out near Merseyside. And then when I was 5, we moved to a village called Thelwall, which is near Warrington. Now, if you've ever been to Warrington on the train, it is the ugliest station, I think, in the world. You come out of the train and you're asphyxiated by the fumes from the soap factory, which is right there on the platform. But there are some nice little Cheshire villages close by, and Thelwall was one of them. So that's where I went to school, and we moved to Grafenhall, which is the next village along, and then to Altrincham, which is a few villages down. So yeah, that was very much part of my life. But I went to study in New York when I was 19. So that became my second home, and it remains so to this day.
So were you from a musical family? I mean, you said you were well, in my phrase, welded to a keyboard, but was there a musical tradition in your household, or was it a family that encouraged, a young boy to follow his passions, whatever they be?
Absolutely no music in the house at all. Well, we had some Frank Sinatra records, I think, and some Irish folk music, but no, nothing classical, no instruments, nothing. So this all came from me, and from an aunt that I had. She lived just down the road on Chester Road, a small walk from where we lived. And we'd go and visit her, and she had a piano. And I was fascinated by this because I had memorized a lot of nursery rhymes by the time I was about 3 or 4. My father said 70, but I don't know whether there are 70 nursery rhymes, but still, maybe that's parental exaggeration. But anyway, we'd go to Aunt Ethel's house, and while they were talking boring things and drinking tea, I was in the corner playing this piano, and I just thought this was the best thing in the world. It was like a PlayStation times 100 for this kid. And so I begged my parents, please, could we have a piano? And they, understandably, a PlayStation you can pop in the wardrobe. A piano is a great big piece of furniture that dominates most people's houses. So my parents, quite understandably, for a while said, no, you'll get bored with it. And they bought me a little toy piano.
Yeah.
And that didn't satisfy. So eventually they bought a piano in an antique shop in another little village close by called Stockton Heath. And then I started piano lessons, and it really went from there.
Now, you see, the difference there is because before then you're doing sort of free form, you're teaching yourself, you're learning, and then comes the reading music part, and that can be a stumbling block, can't it, for a budding musician?
Well, it can, but, and I know there's a debate about this in a way today, about whether we should be educating people musically, and is reading music really important? I think even, except for the real geniuses of jazz, even in jazz, the great ones have learned to read music and to write music. And actually the ones who don't do it very well would love to do it better. I'm thinking of Thelonious Monk, of course he was one of the greats, but he was frustrated sometimes because he had all these ideas and he wanted to get them on paper. So I'm very grateful that, I did start having the music lessons and I learned, because again, Giles, it's a little bit like, a really talented tennis player. Yeah, they can do it all naturally for a while, but you do need a coach. You need someone to say, actually, if you hold the racket this way, you're going to be able to hit the ball with more security, or whatever it is. So, I started with this local piano teacher. She wasn't very good, I have to say. She was, just very much the local teacher. And so eventually, through a very lucky state of affairs, I was able to go to a better teacher who lived back on the Wirral, near where I was born.
When did you realize, and when did people around you realize that, there was something there? There was something more than just being able to read music and play by rote, but there was because the difference between being a performer and being a virtuoso is how you approach and what feeling you put into the playing, and how you take those seemingly indecipherable notes and make them a living, feeling entity.
Yeah. Well, it felt very natural to me from the beginning. It was something that I with this local piano teacher, she would come in. I think the lessons were 30 minutes long, and she'd leave me pieces to learn for the next week. And she was getting in her car, and I'd already memorized them, and I wanted to do some more. So I think my parents saw that this was not a usual thing. I really was absorbing this like a sponge. But you're right. It's partly that speed and naturalness with the instrument, but it's also partly what expression you put into it, how you take those notes. A little bit like an actor, we can all read lines from the plays, but the great actors are able to take those lines and they make you cry, or they make you laugh, or they make you never forget those lines in your life. And that's really what we're looking for, I think, with performers. And this is true right up to students at university age.
How important was music in your school that you went to? Was it was it regarded? Because a lot of people, and there's a wonderful Sir Ken Robinson speech about how we don't put music or any of the arts, dance, theatre on a higher level than we do. There's a hierarchy within education, and it starts with the maths and the sciences and the humanities, and it works its way down. And you'll find that music is theatre, or music and drama at one point, and then dance is basically bumping along the bottom. So was music considered seriously at your school, or was it extracurricular, or how did that fit in with the rest of your education?
Well, not at infant school, Giles. No, at infant school we played the recorder and sang hymns in the assembly, and that was it. And that was pretty grim.
The recorder. Who can forget the recorder? It's an instrument of war.
And even worse, the harmonica. I don't know whether you ever came across that, the plastic thing that sounded like plastic. But so, yeah, in primary school, no, there was no music there. My parents were very supportive, and they drove me around for music lessons. My mother took on an extra job to pay for all of this. And so, I was not from a background that we had a lot of stuff in the house, and a lot of, but they had the human encouragement, I think, which is perhaps the most important thing. But then when it came to high school, I was meant to go to Lymm Grammar School, which is the local school there, but I got into Chetham's School of Music in Manchester, which was a high school that had a music emphasis. So from that point, it was different. Although, and I write about this in quite a lot of detail in the book, it was a chaotic school. Two of my teachers ended up in prison. The academic standards were absolutely the lowest in certain subjects. And then we had certain brilliant teachers who were amazing. So it was a total mess. It was a school that this is the 1970s. This could not exist today. It was of another era. It was an independent school, fee paying. I was given a scholarship by Cheshire County Council. Very grateful to them for that. But that's when the music came into education. But what you were saying earlier, Giles, absolutely. I just think we've not even begun to explore how important the arts are to our human lives. Human life is not just about ticking a box. It's not just about earning money. It's about flourishing and community. And the arts is where all that comes to play.
And during the situation, shall we say, that we found ourselves in, when most of us couldn't leave our houses, my goodness, you could either go down on Netflix binge if you wanted to, but a lot of people spent their time being creative, writing their stories, and a lot of people turned to, because when our lives are brought to a screeching halt, there is comfort to be found. There is inspiration, like there's a warm blanket, isn't there, in the arts, and especially music, and especially the classics, because you can bring your own interpretation to several pieces.
That's right. Yeah, music is wonderfully vague. It doesn't tell us what to do. It doesn't preach. It just creates this ecstasy, actually, where we step out of ourselves into another world. And to me, that's, in our brief little lives on this planet, that's a very important thing to have. It brings joy and comfort and stimulation. I mean, it's not just all about feeling good. It's actually about training the brain. And I think kids who learn musical instruments, they have better concentration. There are many, many studies about this, but somehow the politicians haven't quite got round to making it part of policy yet.
And also the great thing about learning an instrument is it teaches you discipline, because it's not the instant hit, because you can be as good as you like. And trust me, I did violin until it almost killed me. And then I try and turn to classical guitar. But you know that you have 30 minutes of a day, and if you want to get to that certain point. So it teaches you that, and the endorphin rush, if you like, of actually completing that difficult scale is something that you can't replicate.
Yeah. I think we all like to set ourselves tests or challenges in life. If everything is too easy, then I think we don't enjoy it as much. I mean, it comes down to that. It's actually, I don't do this, and this sounds crazy, but, I'm sure that if you actually build a fire on a cold day and chop the wood, you actually feel better about the warmth that comes out than just flicking a switch on the wall. I
live in a cottage from the 18th century on the side of a reservoir, and I'm off grid, and that is my weekend task, Stephen. So I am 100% with you on that one, because if you get up in the morning and you grab the firewood that you've stored over the summer and haul it back into the house, and then spend a good half an hour huffing and puffing whilst the coffee is brewing, all is well with the world.
Right.
But you walked away from music. You had what you described as yourself as a bit of a breakdown in your teens. So was it just everything you were going through, a growing process? You were questioning what you were doing in the world, as we all do when we hit that difficult age, and you decided that you didn't want to do this anymore?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how it happened. It's, it's difficult to go back to that time and trace all the lines. I was 12 and 13. They can be difficult years. I realized that I was gay from a very early age. I also write about this in the book. Even when I was 4 and 5, I sort of knew, even though I didn't know what it was. And actually at that point, I think probably it was still illegal. You could still go to jail. So, there was that sort of pressure. And then I was very scared of getting mugged, being attacked on the street, because I was never a very athletic person. I wouldn't have been able to fight back. And then after sort of overcoming that fear, I was mugged. So it was like, it all sort of fell apart. And then I wasn't going to school very much. And then I fell behind at school. I did very badly at school. So all of these things came together. And I think one of the things I hope that might come out of this book, at least for just a few people, is, don't give up. You can have teen years when everything's fallen apart, but you can still pick things up again and start again. It's not all about having a steady progress and doing well in your exams every year. You might have a year when things just go pear-shaped. Well, the important thing is not falling. It's just getting up after that fall.
And if we were doing a Hollywood movie of your life, you'd be sitting there in the fed up with life and the whole thing. And then in the background would be glinting the piano keys, the black and whites would be and you'd look over and suddenly you walk over there and the music would swell. And there you go. That would be your eureka moment. Was it like that? I mean, or did you just I mean, it's always there, isn't it? I suppose. And you just thought, well, how did you go back tentatively to, and then stick with it? Because from that going back to it, of course, there's the small method, there's the small matter of going to Juilliard, which is, is not a bad place to pick up from, is it?
Right. I think there are a number of things. One important thing was I became a Catholic when I started to become interested when I was around 16. And that changed my life in many ways. It gave me a certain discipline. It gave me a certain peace. I'd say a certain joy. It's trying to think about other people rather than always thinking, well, am I depressed today or am I sad today? If you reach out from yourself to others, often you can forget about your own problems. So that was one very important part of my life. And then and coming to that from Elgar, from the Dream of Gerontius, which is his big oratorio that he wrote. That was a piece that one of my music teachers told me to study, and it's about a man reaching death and going beyond death with his guardian angel to heaven. Really, it's more a philosophical thought about life and death than it is a story. But that piece was very important to me, and so these things came together, and then, I guess I got through adolescence with the double gift of a renewed love for music and some kind of a solidity of faith that kept me going, even though with being gay was a problem and a challenge, and it sort of remains in a way. But still, it was there at the back of and at the front also of my daily life.
And you talked about going to your high school, which was creative and artistic and somewhat crazy. And then you go to the Royal Northern College of Music and Juilliard. And what is Juilliard like? Because I mean, you must feel when you walk in through the doors that you're walking into hallowed portals almost.
Well, at that time, actually, academically, the Royal Northern College was better. It's a great school, and really, from the moment I started there, my undergraduate degree, I just started to flourish because the teaching was good. It was ordered. It was sensible. And I had a wonderful time, wonderful teachers. Juilliard at that time, and I teach there now. I'm on the faculty. I have only time for 2 students, but I fit them in whenever I'm in the States, including next week. Actually, I'm off there. But, and now I think what Juilliard does is attract some of the greatest talents from around the world, and they keep the reputation of the school afloat, because actually, when you get to 18, 19, 20, you've either got it or you haven't, frankly. Nobody's going to come at 18, not very good, and then suddenly Juilliard will create them a master out of them, or a mistress, or whatever the female equivalent would be. It's not going to happen. But what Juilliard can do is it's all about cherries on cakes. It's about taking something that's already really very good and finding a way to develop that to the absolute highest level. And I think that's what all of us on the faculty there do. We listen to audition tapes. And honestly, one of my faculty said to me recently, he said, I listened to these audition tapes and I gave them all a 10 because they can all play better than I can. But we have amazing people auditioning. And honestly, you listen to one after another, and there are probably, out of 200, there are probably 3 that you think, well, this is really exceptional. This could have a career. But all of the other ones are really very, very good. And it becomes hard to choose the good from the bad. And thrillingly for me, so many from Asia, from China, Japan, Korea. It thrills me because I think how delighted Beethoven, Chopin, these Western composers would be to find their music so loved and played so fabulously by people who 200 years ago would never have heard a note of it.
And it just goes to prove as well that not only is music an international language, but it's a timeless language, because people will, you're opening the door to something written 300, 400, maybe 500 years ago now.
I find that thrilling, Giles, actually, the fact that this music, it just transcends all of these divisions. And I spoke before of our tiny lives on this earth. When I'm playing Beethoven, a piece that was written 200 years ago, I'm united in a sort of way of a human community way beyond my community living here in London or in the UK or in Europe or on the whole planet, really. And then when you add to that across the cultures, going to play, I was just in Korea last year. Korea has an incredible appetite for Western classical music. And just playing for this audience there, and I realized probably half of them, we wouldn't even be able to say much to each other and understand each other, communicating. But this music, we're communicating in this incredible way. And at the end of the performance, you see the smiles in the audience, and you see that we've had an exchange. We've had a very intimate moment here on stage and in the audience, which is, to me, such a treasure. And I find it very, very moving. It's one of the things I like most about the career side of it is traveling around and being with people from different cultures and backgrounds and views and opinions. And all of that goes away, and we're just human beings together. And it's a great feeling.
What do you hope that people will learn from Enough?
Gosh, well, they'll learn a bit about me, although not everything, because Enough is, I drew certain lines and there are certain people that I left out and I've changed some names because I didn't want to. So they'll learn a little bit of that. But I think more than that, what I said earlier, just that you don't have to have this steady progress. You don't have to be some kind of a whiz kid throughout your whole life. You can have dips in your life. You can come from a background where music was not in the home, where there were not wasn't endless money to pay for everything and to go down. You don't have to be going all the time to concerts in major cities. You don't even have to live in major cities. You can be from a small village and yet still with determination and encouraging parents, but not dominating parents. They never forced me to do anything. It is possible to go ahead and have a career as a musician or as anything else in the arts.
The book is called Enough. It's by Sir Stephen Hough, who we're speaking to today. Stephen, if people want to find you online, I know there's a website because I was admiring it a little bit earlier on today. So where can they, in the nicest possible way, track you down?
Well, probably the website's the easiest, which is just my name, stephenhough.com. I've also on Twitter, which is my last name, Hough. So you can find me there. And that's actually the limit to my social media life. I can't cope with it. I mean, my publicist has a Facebook page, but I don't go there. So that's about the limit. But
you don't TikTok or anything like that. I can't see that happening.
Too much. I'm too old for that, I need the cottage by the reservoir and the chopping of the wood.
Yeah, indeed. Next time you're in Spain, you can pop over and help me. The book is called Enough. It's by Sir Stephen Hough, who we're speaking to today. So Stephen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's lovely to chat, Giles. All the best.